Well, here we are. We're in the final week of Lent. I don't know what it's been like for you, but for me, it really feels like this Lent has just flown by. In today's Gospel, we see a couple of interesting things taking place. First of all, we see Mary anointing the feet of Jesus with that expensive nard perfume, that burial spice. The Gospel today tells us that the scent of this burial spice could be smelt throughout the entire house. When I read that, it was kind of reminiscent to me of what is about to happen. We see the disciples again in another house in the upper room, this time in hiding and fear, cowering really under the same thing, in a way, the stench of death. Jesus is dead on the cross and they don't know what is about to happen. Thankfully for us, we know the ending and it's all good. But there's almost like today's gospel is kind of foreshadowing what is about to come. The other thing about that incident, of course, is when Judas gets upset and says, what a waste of money. We could have sold this expensive perfume and put the money in the coffers and given it to the poor. The gospel today tells us that he wasn't really interested in the poor. In fact, he was only interested in getting his own hands on the money, and he just used the poor as an excuse. And it reminded me of our own lives, because how often are we critical of other people and we claim that our motivation is altruistic and caring and loving, but really it's our own sinful selfishness and failing that is really motivating the criticism of others. It's a reminder, I think, to always stop and check ourselves. Are we acting and thinking and speaking about others and passing judgment from a true place of charity and humility, or is our own selfishness the real root cause of why we are critical of other people? The other thing that happens in today's gospel is really quite frightening, and it happens at the end. And we see the chief priests deciding that they are going to kill Lazarus as well as Jesus. And to me, this is where now the insanity is really starting to pile up. Not only have they set their mind on killing Christ, but now they want to kill the very people that he has helped as well. Why do they want to kill Lazarus? Because Lazarus is a living witness to Christ, and they cannot even bear to have a living witness to Christ in their midst anymore. Lazarus is you and I. We are all like Lazarus. We have been raised from death to a new life in Christ, just like Lazarus. But also, just like Lazarus, we are called to be a living witness to Christ. And sometimes, just like Lazarus, we are going to find ourselves in situations where that requires us to be countercultural. And when you live in a culture that doesn't want to hear from Christ, the last thing they want around is anyone who is a living witness to Christ. The call and the constant history of Christianity is about a call to be countercultural. Our call to Christ is not a call to establish some earthly culture. It is a call to be faithful to the culture of the kingdom of heaven. And at times, the earthly culture around us is not going to buy into that. Selfishness, sin, and pride is going to cause the culture around us to want to head in directions that are wrong, even at times gravely wrong. And in those instances, we are called to be like Lazarus. We are that living witness, that countercultural witness. The problem, of course, is that the culture doesn't want us around when we are that countercultural witness. So remember today, as we reflect on this story, the call to follow Christ is sometimes a very difficult and narrow and hard path to walk. It is not a call to popularity. It is not a call to comfortability. There is nothing comfortable about picking up a cross. There is nothing safe and popular about being countercultural. When the culture is going in the wrong direction, there is nothing safe about being Lazarus and being that living witness to Christ who is going 180 degrees in the other direction. Today's saint quote of the day comes from Saint Faustina, and she said this: "I know well that the greater and more beautiful the work is, the more terrible will be the storms that rage against it." And doesn't this really speak to the heart of today's gospel, where we see that moment, that awful raging storm of hatred, of pride, of anger and of violence that is now being directed not just at Christ, but also at his followers, at the people who he has helped. That raging storm did not come to an end, though, 2,000 years ago. It has been consistent throughout the history of the church. The closer we come to Christ, the more faithful we are to his teachings. Very often the more difficult it becomes, and the harder and the darker that storm begins to rage. Our Christianity is not a call to a storm-free existence. Our Christianity is a call to walk into the heart of that storm, carrying our cross with great trust and great love for Christ and love for neighbour.